Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Live from Las Vegas, it's time for you to be talking movies with America's most award-winning film critic, John Barbour.
You're being so gentle. I've heard you give reviews and you're so rough. You're saying.
How would you have evaluated your own work in some of the films that you did prior to The Longest Shot? I mean,
much better than you, my friend.
Our next guest is one of those rare talents who has something to say and can say it funny. He's a writer-performer on the new Laugh-In and one of the most popular, outspoken, and entertaining personalities on the local news here in Los Angeles. He's won a half a dozen Emmys as a film critic and host of his own shows. Let's welcome Mr. John Barbour, right over there.
Hi, this is John Barbour, and this is Talking Movies. And this is going to be my very, very, very favorite show. Doug, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, John.
Well, that's good. And I want to thank you so much. I also want to thank your brother, Don, because for the last 23 shows, you've been a wonderful, wonderful help in helping me get this wonderful show mounted. And it's amazing that so many people like it. So thank you indeed. Unfortunately, I am putting it on hiatus for a while. And fortunately, I have you and Don to re-air the shows we've done still on alternate Saturday nights at 7 o'clock. So I deeply, deeply appreciate that. And thank you so much. The reason that I'm so happy about this show, I thought that the last show that I should do would be of one of the three geniuses that I have met in my life. The first one, of course, is Jim Garrison. The second was Buckminster Fuller. And the third is my son, Christopher. Now, I had nothing to do with designating my son as a genius. That was done by the LA School Board when he was 5 years of age, but he's evidenced it ever since. And also, I wanted to talk to him because he has an amazing story to tell, because he did it all on his own, which is very, very tough in this business. So, Christopher, how are you and where are you?
Well, thank you. I'm doing well. I'm in the midst of working on the it's not really a reboot, but the Criminal Minds is returning, and it will be on Paramount Plus. So I'm in the middle of doing of mounting that, of helping to mount that with many of the original cast and many of the writers who were on the original series that had been on for 15 years. And I'm at home right now.
Oh, so, well, that's great. Now, Paramount Plus, is that like going to be on real television? Or is
it is not real, or will. It's the future of real television, or everything will become cable television, because commercials will be everywhere. Like cable TV in the 80s, where they said, if you subscribe, there won't be any commercials. There was On Select TV, and there was HBO without commercials. And then eventually there's basic cable where there's commercials. So even Netflix will have commercials at some point. But Paramount Plus is a subscriber platform. And so at Thanksgiving, the Criminal Minds will return. And I think will be a Thanksgiving. What is it? Black Friday and then Cyber Monday. There'll be a deal for you to, subscribe for $1. And then if you like what you see, I don't know what the annual fee would be.
Okay. So what is your exact title in the show?
I am one of the executive producers.
Oh, wow.
So literally 20 years to the day that I started writing for television. I became an executive producer and on Criminal Minds, and I'm one of the writers.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. Now, you know, when I have guests on the show, I always say to them, you know, if we were making a movie of your life, let's start at the beginning and tell me a little bit about your parents and your interests. But I know all about the beginning.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but I do have a number of questions to ask you that I have never asked you.
Mm-hmm.
What were your early passions as a child? Were your passions music because you were unbelievably musical? We'll get into that in a minute. Were your passions television because your father was on television? Were your passions movies because your father was a critic? Or was your passion golf, which you started on your own, and you were on television when you were 4 as the Caucasian Tiger Woods? You and Craig Stadler are the only 2 golfers to win back-to-back high school city championships. And there is no question, Christopher, that you had, I mean, when they used to introduce you in the junior golf tournaments, they always used to introduce you as the sweet swinger, always. And we're going to have a picture of how sweet that swing is. So what were your early passions?
All of them, I would say all of the above, but I mean, why did I end up here ultimately? I mean, because golf was very much a passion, and I enjoyed competing in that. But I do think that probably the environment of show business was always attractive to me compared to other places in life. So that where you and Mom were, behind the stage, behind the backstage of all of that. You know, it's interesting to me because a lot of people, particularly today with entertainers, and they're disillusioned with the fact that their heroes are not like the characters they play. But I always thought that was true, because that was sort of the beauty of show business was, what's on stage is fantastic. And obviously with stand-up comedy that you did, or performing, I got to see all of the stuff that went on before, and the rehearsing and the mistakes. And then when you do the show, the audience has no sense of that. So it's just like going to a restaurant. Like, you don't care how hard it was to get that meal out to you. You just want the meal to be good. That's the joy.
But hold it. The early show business was you and that Welsh singer.
What was that?
You and that Welsh singer. You know who I'm talking about?
I don't remember. I'm not sure I remember the Welsh singer.
Oh my God, you're kidding. You knew Tom Jones.
Oh, the Tom Jones of Yes.
Yes.
Well, the music, yeah. I mean, I loved music. And I think the writing, so it's a combination, because you wrote a lot of comedy. I didn't, that's always been a little intimidating for me, but although seeing you work and writing of the multiple writing, whether was writing your own stand-up material, or writing the reviews, or the writing, typing, just, and all of that, which was generally humorous. I don't think I ever thought that I could do, although I think I'm funny at times. That's a very special skill.
But what about the singing?
But the singing, I know, I like the singing. I don't know.
You remember hold it. Don't you remember what you used to do? You had 2 Tom Jones albums, and you remember them, okay? Yeah. Now, your father's not musical in the least, except your mother is a great singer, obviously, and sang with Earl Hines, a big band. You would get a skip rope, and you would climb up on a slide, and you would charge me and your mother a nickel to come in and listen to you sing.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, you were always on key. You were so good. How come you didn't continue the music? And do you remember Tom Jones bringing you on stage at Caesar's Palace?
I don't remember. I remember meeting Tom Jones, and I remember going to a couple of his shows, but I don't remember that in particular. I don't know. I can't really say why the music, although performing is always a little, as I got older, was probably a little more intimidating. And it seemed a little bit easier because I like to say, even when I tried to be an actor for a brief time, it's the auditioning that's hard. So, if you read something of mine and don't like it, I have a much easier time hearing that than if you're rejected as a performer. The singing,
We're going to get to the acting thing in a minute, but to Tom Jones, we were sitting in the front row at Caesar's Palace, and you were wearing his beautiful blue Levi suit that your mother had bought you, and Tom Jones had sort of made a pass at your mother. And you put up your hand to stop him, and the audience cheered and laughed. So he grabbed your hand and brought you up on stage, and you were on stage as though you'd been on stage all of your life. Do you remember why you stopped liking Tom Jones?
Well, I mean, he seemed like when I met him, he seemed not to be a very, for me, it seemed rude, a little rude and cold.
You remember the incident? We went to see.
I don't, unfortunately.
Okay, we went to the Greek Theater, and I was all excited, and we were invited backstage, and he was rude to one of the stagehands. You never sang his song again, but you know who you took up?
What was that?
Buddy Holly.
Yes.
I don't know how many times we saw the Buddy Holly story.
That's true. The Buddy Holly story, and around that time is All That Jazz, which is very influential to me. So yeah.
Yeah. So it was, your musical talent was just phenomenal, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And I
don't know. I think the writing or became a little more interesting to me, and I don't know why. I can't really pinpoint why that was really.
Yes, but you were golfing before you were writing, I think. Yes. Except with Margaret, who was your babysitter. You used to write her poems and songs and stuff. She just absolutely adored it. But your golf, what prompted you to get into golf, and how much did you like it, and how long did you pursue it? Because I never tried to influence you to do anything except play golf.
Yeah. I pursued it, and then when I got out of college, I had gotten a little bit burned out because it was tough mentally on me. But then after a couple of years of being away from it, I really did I did pursue it, and I moved to Vegas. And it was still and probably now in this part of my life, I enjoy it more than I probably enjoy it most of all now. And I'm playing very well as on top of that. So, but I think I just have a better approach to how I.
What are your two favorite memories as a golfer?
Wow, I have a lot of favorite memories as a golfer. One of the best rounds I ever played was at the Stanford University. With a fellow that I had met at the Canadian Open. He ended up playing, he was older than me, but we ended up going to Stanford around the same time. His name was Brad Greer. We both played, he shot 65 one afternoon, and I was playing with him, and I shot 66. It was just a really nice round of golf, and probably the best I played at Stanford.
Do you remember the first time you shot 69?
I do remember that. I also remember there was a
against whom?
I think Bob May.
That's right. Who lost to Tiger Woods in a playoff. I think somebody kicked Tiger Woods' ball back into. But I'll tell you the two favorite memories for me. Do you remember at all the Comedians Golf Tournament in San Diego?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you remember the host of it?
Yes, Lucille Ball.
Lucille Ball. And then the guys who comics would get up and tee off. She described who they are and tee off. Do you remember what happened to you?
I vaguely remember, but I've heard the story, so I don't know if I remember it so much as I've been told the story about, like, I got up there and I wouldn't swing when I was.
That's right. Do you know why you wouldn't swing?
Because she hadn't introduced me yet, and she had introduced everyone else.
Yeah,
so then you had to go over there and ask her. Hey, he needs you to introduce.
Oh my God, she just absolutely loved you. It was hilarious, and you hit the ball great. My second favorite memory about your playing golf, I think you were 15 and you won the Canadian Nationals somewhere in Saskatchewan or Winnipeg, or where was that you won?
I think it was not Winnipeg. I think
Manitoba.
It might have been in wow, I think it was in Edmonton. It was in Edmonton.
Yeah, in Edmonton. And do you know where we went the following year when you had to defend it?
No. Was it?
It was Moncton, New Brunswick.
Oh, Moncton, New Brunswick. Right.
Oh, and the reason that's such an amazing memory to me is Moncton, New Brunswick. There are only two places in the world where the tide is the highest and lowest. One is Moncton and one is Australia. And why the Canadian government and the Tourist Bureau haven't advertised this is beyond me. But there was a cliff. You could walk down the wooden stairs, and there were these huge pillars out there with trees on the top. And the ocean would be a mile away, and they'd ring a bell, and we would have to run back upstairs. And here was this wall of water like a tsunami coming in. They called it the tidal bore. It sent the river back upstream. And then you and I would go and park in the car and watch the black bears eat in the garbage. I loved it.
Yes. No, I think they call it like the flower pot, where there's a part of the Bay of Fundy where you can walk down under this. At high tide, it looks like there's an island with a tree on it. But at low tide, you can go it's like, it seems like it's 70 feet down you can be at the bottom of it, and it's just a little outcropping. So it's really, it's amazing. It was amazing. That's right. Moncton, New Brunswick.
Okay. So now we come to the point. You had an unbelievable, and still have, one of the greatest golf swings ever. What made you stop playing golf and then go to Hollywood? But well,
I was a little bit, I was doing both at the same time while I was in Vegas, and it ended up being that I was working with I had a writing partner, and we did an adaptation for Kathleen Kennedy, who owned the rights to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we had done an adaptation of that book, and it turned out that she liked it, and she passed it along to Universal, that also had the rights to do the movie at the time. Although they did not make the movie at the time, they thought it was going to be too expensive. It was like 1999. But I was, traveling, doing the Nike tour events, and at that, and then we sold that, and eventually it sort of one out over the other, because about 3 years after that, I got a job, still with my writing partner at that time, for the show Crossing Jordan, which was like 2002.
Oh my goodness gracious! Because I have played golf with a lot of guys who have a lot of money, and they have a lot of ideas for television and movies. And they say, "How do I get in?" And I said, "I don't know." And they say, "Well, your son's in there." And I said, "Listen, I don't even know how he got in." So when you got to Hollywood, what were was your first job as a writer, or was it as a gopher, or whatever?
Well, the first job was as a writer, but then what ended up happening, because I did the partnership, like when I got on Crossing Jordan with my writing partner, we had a difficult time. I enjoyed the process of writing for television, and my partner really didn't. It was, we didn't get, it was very confusing. We wrote a script that we thought we'd done a good job with, but then it ended up, they told us it was unproducible, it was too big, and so we tried to rewrite it, but then they eventually took it away from us, and it seemed as if we'd never, really were the communication among the writers was not very good. So, but I still like the idea that we were going to, on TV, there's always a reason to say yes, we're going to make a show. And Kiri, my writing partner at the time, really preferred the movie world. So we decided, she pursued the movies and I tried to stay in television. But because we had a writing partnership, people didn't know what did I write and what did she write. So I had to start over again and start to write on my own. And that's when I got a job at CSI. And I was doing legal clearances. So that's, when you, on television shows, you can't just have a water product like this. You can't just have PG water. You have to clear a name for the water and make up a name, and you got to go through it and make sure. But sometimes you want to can I get Fiji to agree to sign off and allow it to be? So that was the first thing I did. So I was more of a legal assistant, and then I became what was called the script coordinator, which is a liaison between production and the writers to make a script readable for production. And
you were exposed because of your father's job as a critic. You were more exposed to movies than you were television. As a matter of at one time.
Although, but because you worked particularly when you worked at KNBC, but because you were at studios and there was a lot more local television at that time, original local television, that's what I remember. So when you went to, let's say you were still doing Critic at Large stuff, whether it was KTLA or KTTV, but as I said, particularly at KNBC, because there was The Tonight Show, there was the Midnight Special, Sanford and Son was shot there. So we saw, or you took me through, and again, when Real People would be shot there as well, all of that, Chico and the Man was shot at KNBC, at that studio complex. So there were a lot of The Odd Couple. So when I think of television or being exposed to it, or, how many times did we eat at the commissary? So The Tonight Show, so all the years of Carson walking by there, or, I do have a memory of you trying to get me into the Bob Hope Desert Classic by going behind the scenes when Hope was a guest host. Well, no, he had a special. He was shooting a special next to where they showed The Tonight Show, and we went back, and you'd said, is it possible to get my son in there? And he said something along the lines of that there, there's a long waiting list. And he said, and you said something along the lines of but they're older, so maybe they're going to pass away. What time is it now? And I don't know that he found that. I think that he didn't think that was very. He didn't think that was particularly funny, but as I said, that's my memory of show business. And again, these were sitcoms, not dramas. Although you probably don't remember this. We went to New York for the upfronts for Real People. And that was the year that Hill Street Blues was going to premiere. Right. And they had and you were busy doing something else, but there was a theater where they were showing Hill Street Blues. They were showing the pilots. Right. And they showed the pilot to Hill Street Blues, which people walked out of. Actually, some people got motion sickness because at the beginning of Hill Street Blues, there's a handheld camera. It seems like it's a documentary. Like really, no one had ever seen anything like that on TV before as a drama. And so it seemed, and it had a very violent ending. I think 2 police officers get shot, who were actually the best characters in the show, the people like you enjoyed being with. So I saw people's reaction to this. And again, it just little things like that where I saw.
Don't you remember? I thought you were going. I thought you might end up in television because I think you were 5 or 6 when I took you to see Superman, and I let you review it. Yep. Do you remember that?
I do, and I turned it into a book too. That review into a book. There was a project where we had to make books, so illustrate books, and we took I took the review. And made it into a book. And
you were more popular than your father. Now, Kiri, she went into movies. So Where did she end up in movies, and are you still friends?
We are still friends, and in fact, we may actually end up working. I just talked to her the other day. We may end up working on a project together. We're talking about something. She ended up in a long, roundabout way. She became an executive for Lucasfilm for a time, and now she's an independent producer. But she consults with Pixar, and she was just in Thailand making a movie. So she's become a producer.
Wow, how interesting.
So she's doing very well.
Now, back to the business. You mentioned very casually about the business about being an actor.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that story about, you were at Stanford at the time, and members of the Old Vic, I think there were 4 to 6 members of the Old Vic were touring the United States looking for potential actors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the story?
I vaguely remember the story. I mean, I memorized something from Hamlet and did it, and they were impressed and it had invited me to come out to do.
Yes, that you were the only one invited to go to England. Okay, yes. And when you called me, I think it was To Be or Not to Be, and I said to you, you know what? Everybody in the world has done it. Mm-hmm. But if you do it in a unique way, it'll make you different. And they loved you. Now, you didn't go to England, but you went to New York. And didn't you audition at, what is it?
The American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
And they didn't even ask you to come back a second time. Didn't they hire you on the spot? Or let you in on the spot?
I don't know if it was on the spot, but yeah, I did get in. So I was there for a time in the early 90s. Yeah.
Why did you not become an actor? I mean, a really nice looking guy with a terrific voice who was a brilliant actor, but it looked like you just hated selling yourself.
I mean, the selling, to this day, that part is hard. I mean, that's something I admire about you. I mean, I think the ability to sell the project or to really, that part is really, again, I didn't pursue acting, but even today, I would argue, pitching a television series or a movie, it's still about your performance as a writer. And it's like, I don't understand why I need to perform as a writer when, it's just, why can't you read the document? But it's still true. I mean, it's still true today that, so it's easier to pitch a comedy than a drama because in the room, people are going to laugh or not laugh. So if you're going to try to, pitch a family drama about the patriarch, having cancer, it's hard because it's not funny, it's hard to for them to visualize what it is, and it's still a performance. So that's the hardest part of the writing. Is not the writing; it's if I need to pitch something, that's always a challenge.
I would think the hardest part of the writing is that you do crime shows.
Yes,
and not only would it be difficult to think up a new crime every single week, even though there are thousands of them every day in this country. There are time restraints. There was a time, I think, when television would only allow 6 minutes of commercials, now maybe up to 12 minutes of commercials. So how do you tell a story in 38 minutes, for God's sakes? Mm-hmm. So that, to me, would just be so restricting.
It is. I mean, it is a challenge. It is certainly a challenge. On Paramount Plus, we don't have quite the time restriction, but I do think that that's part of the fun of it is that, I remember my godfather, Chris Hayward, who was also a writer, who had co-created Barney Miller. He had given me as a birthday present years and years ago, a giant volume of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yes.
So I think in that, and so I've always liked, and again, they come in and out of style, they call them procedurals now, but I do like the murder mystery. I've found those to be, entertaining and if well told, it's fun. It's like a piece of music.
Do you know,
even though, mm-hmm.
Do you know how your godfather saved Barney Miller?
I do.
Tell us how he saved.
Well, it's funny too because I'm reminded of that now because we are restricted with our budget. So we talk about how where the drama comes in. They were convinced that the show was going to take place half Barney Miller, captain of a police force or police division in New York City. Half of it was going to take place at his home, which is very contemporary, and half was going to take place in the precinct. But, you know, the most interesting part of the show was taking place at the precinct, and Chris Hayward thought it all should take place at the precinct. But ABC didn't think that was a good idea. But then Chris wrote an episode where they're snowed in and they're in the precinct.
It was the 13th episode. ABC was going to cancel the show.
Oh, they're going to cancel the show. That's right.
Danny Arnold had given up on it, handed the show to your godfather and said, Chris, you do it. So the reason he wanted it to take place in the precinct, because he loved Detective Story with Kirk Douglas. And he thought it would be more interesting, as you pointed out. So that's what he did. He wrote the thing about the snowstorm. And Richard Schickel, the critic, the darling critic in New York, saw it and said, my God, this is really good. And so they picked it up for another 13 weeks. And Danny Arnold still did not think it would succeed. And he signed the wife of Barney Miller for 4 years, just in case it did succeed, and only used her 4 times in 4 years, but still had to pay her. What a business you're in. Okay, now you end up, the last thing you did, everybody I know absolutely loved it. It was the thing you did on Netflix. It was called In From the Cold.
Yes.
And
created by Adam Glass. Yeah.
It was written by whom?
It was created by Adam Glass, who I met on when I was doing Criminal Minds Beyond Borders.
Okay, so when it was the two of you that put that show together?
Well, I mean, we had a writer's room, which was in 2019. We had 5 writers, all very, very talented writers, and we put the show together, 8 episodes, and then Netflix wanted to shoot in Madrid, so we ended up going at the beginning of 2020, and then the world shut down. But that was 1 week before we started rolling camera.
You're talking about COVID.
Before COVID, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so so we were a week away from shooting, Netflix called and said, we got to get you out of there. And I didn't want to go. I didn't want to come back because I thought that was really their way of saying, there's going to be this sort of health emergency, but if you leave, like we weren't going to pick it up. And I said, I could stay. And if it's beyond 2 weeks, we have a bigger problem. But they insisted, and really, if I had stayed, I would have been trapped in Madrid for probably 8 months. But I came home. Netflix, they wanted to continue to make the show possible. So a year later, we returned to Madrid to finally shoot the show in 2021.
It was wonderful, but I don't think you were able to use the original actors because of COVID.
No, we had the original actors, but what our restrictions were, the restrictions were that we were going to get some additional actors from England or from the European Union in general. We were able to sneak some in before there were restrictions with England. We had a wonderful cast of actors from Russia. So we had 2 or 3 actors that came from Russia, but they had to quarantine. But at a certain point, we couldn't hire anyone that was not in Spain. So, we had our core cast was a mix of English, American, and Russian actors. But then the guest stars were all from Spain, but they had to learn Russian sometimes, or Chinese, or English. And because of COVID, sometimes we had to have a couple of actors cover.
It was not only an excellent show. I mean, a couple of my friends were really junkies of the show. They would, watch the reruns, and they're very, very, very critical.
Yeah.
And I think it was in the top 25 for a number of months, and that was supposedly how Netflix would decide whether or not they're going to continue a show if you stay in the top 25.
Right.
Why did it not continue?
You know, I think that for the bottom line for Netflix changed while we were making the show. If we had premiered, if there had not been COVID, for instance, because COVID also, you know, increased their subscribers by millions and millions all over the world because we were all trapped and people were starting to watch Netflix. It wasn't the kind of show I assumed it because it was a spy. They called it Spy-Fi. It was a science fiction show with a little spy element to it, that we would just have to be good in that genre or popular. And as you say, within the top 25, but they really wanted it to be a bigger hit. And there were a couple of other shows that premiered around us that did better, and they were hoping to get more subscribers. So it wasn't just retaining viewers. They were hoping that the show would create noise so that you would, you know, a bunch of new people would subscribe.
But in the last year, they've lost about 250,000 subscribers, even though we still have COVID.
Yeah, I mean, well, people are going out in the world. Like we were, you know, they had an audience around the world that was on lockdown for many, many months, and so people really, there was a huge boost in subscribers. And the truth is, you know, there's a lot of good stuff on Netflix, but there's a lot of bad stuff. So once you know, go through, you know, a lot of their material, you know, is it worth maintaining the subscription? Some people are now probably cherry picking. So they'll have Netflix for a month and they'll binge watch some shows, and then they'll go to HBO Max and they'll watch, and then they'll, you know, get off that and go on and, you know, go to Paramount Plus. I think the math changed when we premiered. The bar was higher.
Is Spain the only country that you worked in?
Spain is not the only country I've worked in. I did a show in 2017 called it was originally called The Skeleton Crew because it was a script written by a woman named Wendy West. But they didn't actually have so I went to Poland. I went to Warsaw.
Oh my God, you're kidding.
And Łódź, Poland, to help as a consultant with a very wonderful group of writers to write the first season of that show.
How could an American possibly help the Poles write a crime show?
Well, you know, they were very, you know, fortunately, a couple of the writers spoke English, and that was very, it was a wonderful collaboration, actually, because, and actually one of the writers that found it easier to write the show, she had worked on a show in Italy where a dog solves crimes. So I forgot what the name of the show is, but it was kind of a Lassie kind of show. It's like Inspector or something. It's actually a very famous show in Europe. Apparently, it's been on for years and years and years. But I thought, you know, if you're a writer for a show where a dog solves crimes, it's like My Mother the Car. You know, it's like you can wrap your head around these mysteries.
Oh my God!
A little easier.
You remember what you said to me? You'd been in Poland about 2 weeks, and you called. Do you remember the first thing you said to me?
No.
You said, "Oh my God, Dad, I had no idea tomatoes and potatoes tasted so good." You just loved the food. It was a wonderful experience. The thing that's amazing to me is Igor Brodigan, who is the head writer on that show, would say that, you know, the Poles suffer from vitamin D deficiency, and because in the winter, I mean, I was there in the dead of winter, and I saw the sun for an hour one day. Oh my God!
So it was really interesting. Like there is something about, you know, and I had a driver who was a young man, and he would have on his phone, he would have images of girls surfing in Hawaii. And I understood the appeal of shows like Hawaii Five-0 and CSI Miami, because most of the world, you know, the winter is brutal. And you just want to be in paradise, you know, so you don't see the sun.
What are your favorite shows to watch? I know you and Annabelle, your wife, go to plays a lot. What's the best play you've seen? And is there a comic or comedian whom you like?
Well, I, as far as a play, the Layman trilogy, which I recently saw, I thought was very, very, very good. It was produced by the National Theatre in England. I think it was also based on, but it is, you think, oh, it's literally about the Lehman Brothers.
Oh my goodness!
And you think, oh my God, it's going to be boring because it's about, but it was just a beautifully rendered play of the saga of the brothers and how they immigrated here to the United States, and they stole commodities in the South during the Civil War, and they went bankrupt, and then they went to New York, and and how it all fell apart. Like by the time of the housing crisis, there were no actual Lehman Brothers that worked there anymore, and it was sort of a family, the rise and fall of the family. But it is beautifully rendered, and they recently won Tonys, which were well deserving, and the acting was stupendous. There are many comedians. I'm a big fan of Chris Rock. I think that there are several comedians. I offhand, I'm drawing a blank on the names, unfortunately, but I do like to see a stand-up comedy. I admire it very much. The idea of and although it's because I have a love-hate, when I would see you do some stand-up comedy, you were very at ease when you did Real People, when you performed that show, even writing that show, there was never, or even doing the reviews, but stand-up, there was a little more, it seemed I could, in preparation, a little more angst, or it appeared to be, before you would perform.
Oh yes, I was a mess before I went on stage.
But that you didn't have that again. I guess that was the stark contrast, I thought, of Real People, where I thought it was. I don't know how you actually felt, but it seemed a little more effortless, even though the same amount of you had to prepare. I mean, you weren't doing a routine per se, but just the ease at which you would want to do the show live, for instance.
When you were 13, do you remember who your favorite comic was? I had never heard.
You mean, what was that?
I'd never heard of him.
Bill Hicks, yeah.
Yes. Hicks. How did you know about Bill Hicks at 13?
Well, I was a little older. I think I was maybe 15 or 16 at the time. I don't, it's interesting how did I find him? I think there were there may have been a late night special that I saw from England and or Canada that aired on cable. And I saw that, and then I ended up hearing some of his records, and now you can see a lot more of him on YouTube. But it's interesting how I found that, and I remembered, the first routine that I remembered of his was like, he jokes about, to him, do you think Jesus, if he came back, would want to see all these crosses? That's
that's hilarious.
JFK, you'd have these rifles around your neck. And he was also funny, but also very political, which was unusual. And he'd not found success in the United States. So I guess
he found it in England, where he was a rock star. So you either saw something from England or that 90-minute special from Montreal, which is one of the greatest stand-ups I've ever seen. And, I was really close to Lenny Bruce at the end. I knew George Carlin, of course, Red Fox used to come to our house all the time. I mean, when he left Sanford and Son, they could find him at our house if they wanted to, because your mother had introduced him to me when I started as a comic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because your mother didn't know what he was talking about because he did these filthy records, but she just knew he was funny and he was sweet. And so she introduced me. But I must say, by far, the greatest American comic was Bill Hicks. And as you pointed out, he's the only one who is intelligent enough and smart enough to be able to make jokes about the assassination of the president of the United States. So now, tell me a little bit about your wife and how you met her, and how long you've been married.
So Annadelle is my wife, and she is a EMDR therapist, as well as I talk about an actor. She is in the art. That's why sort of the love of the theater. But she is a therapist, doing with a very, very successful practice. I often think probably guaranteed to be successful post pandemic. It seems that people are in very dire need now. We did meet in related to an acting school in 1994 when I lived in New York, and then I came back to Los Angeles, still sort of semi pursuing acting. So I went to what was called the Estelle Harmon Actors Workshop, and I met her sister and brother-in-law in 1994.
Her sister is a twin.
Her twin sister.
Did they do that twin gum commercial at one time?
I don't think they did the Doublemint commercial, but they did many commercials and were on Divorce Court as twins, and did work. They did China Beach, so they worked as twins. They got a lot of work. They actually had a pilot that almost went. I think it was like Inspector, like about it was called Hollywood Dog. So they had a pilot that almost went for Fox. But they were, so Tom and Adele is her twin sister, and they were at this actors workshop. So I met them first. And in 94, Annadelle and I had gone on, when I met her at a party, we ended up going on 3 dates. I remember one of them, she remembers another. And then when we re-met 10 years later in 2004, we pieced together that there was another date. And it just didn't work out in 94, and 10 years later go by. A friend of mine had a party at Santa Anita Racetrack, sort of a going away party, and I re-met her, and we hit it off and have really been together ever since. We got married in 2009. So we live in Hollywood, and it's been quite an adventure. I don't think I would have done the travel. I don't think, I think that, the support that she's given me in terms of being able to do some of these projects. I think the hardest part was going to Madrid, not the first time, because she was going to come out and a couple times, but the second time when, I couldn't, I was living alone essentially in Madrid. I don't think I would have, been able to do something like that without her support. And I don't know that I travel as much. I mean, she's opened up that she's the one who really loves to travel. And so that idea, and again, even we had a trip to St. Andrews.
Yes, you and I.
Was she found really encouraged that. You should post up your par from the road hole. I saw Jordan Spieth on the road putting, and you got I don't know if you remember getting up and down from the road hole, and then you parred 6 of the last 8 holes or something like that. So you were very excited.
And I think on the last hole, you had 100-yard putt or something.
Well, so I really finished well. I started off with 2 birdies, and then I remember on like the 6th hole, I hit it into a bunker, and my caddy told me to just chip it out, but I thought I could get over the lip, and I took a double there, which was bad. But on the finishing hole, I hit a big drive, almost got to the green. So I had like 30 yards to like a pitch, which I stubbed, which was embarrassing. But I had a putt. I'm trying to think. Somebody else had it that I saw. It might have been Jordan Spieth, but I putted from this, so I was just on the edge of the green, and the pin was, and I almost made it. I almost made the birdie from like 100 feet away. But I loved that course. I know that they turned it into a bit of a pitch and putt, but that was more the weather. Like, I think those courses are about the weather, and if it's windy and all of that, it can be very challenging. Otherwise, it is not that hard. But no, it's amazing. But that is all that to say that, Annadelle encouraged those, found how we could get there and do that. So,
well, you're lucky to have her because she was in the business,
yes,
all of her life. So you had that support. And I remember when I was doing my other show, I had her on. She was so interesting. She had written a book, and it was a book about advice to couples who were having some difficulty. And she was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And is she going to write another book?
I think she is going to write another book. I think that, and the practice is going well.
So when you said it, does she treat people in Hollywood who are addicted to prescription drugs? Is that it primarily?
No, it's really, she does what's called trauma therapy. So people who have had, experiences in their life that have been very difficult for them to get over. And so they oftentimes will suppress those memories, and they act like cancer in the body. So they fear dealing with those traumas because when they recall those events, they get very emotional, and so with the EMDR training in particular, or the EMDR therapy, it's a way to approach those memories and experiences and try to examine them and deal with them, so that you're not emotionally feeling crippled by those experiences.
Okay, back to the business of movies.
Yes.
What movie? There's one movie I'm going to mention in a minute, but what movies had an impact on you that you recall?
Well, I mean, they've all, from the very beginning, because you were a film critic, I know that a lot of people, when they're raising children, there's there's certain things they shouldn't see. I think for me, my experience was, it wasn't things that I shouldn't see, because we went to see, when I was very young, we went to see a movie called Five Fingers of Death. Yes. So in the early 70s, there were all these Hong Kong martial arts movies because of Bruce Lee. So this was like, and the end of the movie, or near the end of the movie, like the guy was going to cut off his fingers, and I could not watch that. But you had to review it. So I, back when I could wait in the lobby and not feel like someone was going to kidnap me. But
that was Death Race 2000.
Well, there was Death Race 2000, but there was Five Fingers of Death was the one the other one I walked out on.
Yeah,
because I didn't like to look at the violence. But
in Death Race 2000, the movie starts with doctors and nurses wheeling patients out onto the freeway or the highway, taking bets who's going to get hit first. And it's not 4 minutes into the film, and you say, "I can't watch this, Dad. I'll wait for you outside." And yes. I said, "No, it's my job. I got to watch." And you said, "No, Dad, I can't watch this. You were 4." And I said, "No, okay, I'll go." So that became my review. And it was one of my most popular reviews, talking about your reaction to the show. Yeah. But one of the movies that I remember was because you came home and you were so unbelievably sweet to your mother. And the movie was Boogie Nights. Do you remember it?
Was it the Boogie Nights movie or All That Jazz?
No, All That Jazz. I know you loved All That Jazz, which is just, Peter Fosse, unbelievable. Yeah. But it was Boogie Nights with Burt Reynolds, and I forget who the other guy was.
Mark Wahlberg. Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg, and it's like a semi-porno movie.
Yeah.
And you came home and sat your mother down and talked to her about how nice a mother your mother was because of what you saw, Mark Wahlberg's mother. Do you remember that?
I don't exactly remember that, but I could see that. No, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's, I remember the movie very distinctly. So it's very, my favorite of P.T. Anderson's movies is that movie.
Oh, okay. So are there, you know what? It's impossible for me now to go to a movie. Except I had a very, very good actress. I think her name was Donna Mills.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in a movie by a guy I never heard of. And the movie, I think, is called Nope. N-O-P.
Okay.
And evidently he has made 2 or 3 very successful independent movies. Who is he and what are his movies about?
Well, they're genre movies, but they're, they have social commentary. It's Jordan Peele is the writer-director. He was Key and Peele, so he was a comedian. But his movies are genre films. One was called Get Out.
Yes,
there was
very
Us.
popular. Get Out.
Yes. And they're in the guise of a horror film, or Get Out has a sort of to me it's sort of a Body Snatchers kind of feeling to it, but doing social commentary, particularly on race. And it's very, the horror movie using the genres so that, this new movie is feels like it's an alien and invasion movie, but it's really a metaphor for something else. I have not seen it, but he's very good at that kind of material. And I recently read an interview with him, and what I admire about him is that he's been very successful. And so, I'm sure he's getting a lot of, could get a lot of money to do a Marvel movie. And not that there's anything wrong with Marvel movies, but that Jordan, if you can, I think the goal is if you can have the freedom, particularly the financial freedom, to do your own material, why wouldn't you? Why would you, because you have to answer. And and this is the one downside of even doing a Criminal Minds, is that it's not just, I get to make these choices. I have to make certain choices and then gain some kind of corporate consensus. And sometimes that's hard because not everybody, it's like being in a band and some of the members of the band are tone deaf.
Well, how could a guy like Jordan make a small movie like that and get the money and get a release for it?
I think he was successful. I mean, first he was a successful with Key and Peele, so he was, and so there, I'm sure he had some relationship. But really, it came down to Get Out. His first feature was enormously successful, and that helped him quite a bit to gain sort of power to be able to do. And then his next movie was not as successful, but pretty successful. So he's gained the power to, for now, and we'll see how well this movie does, to do his own material. It didn't cost. I'm sure Get Out did not cost much to make.
No, I'm sure it didn't. Donna Mills said it didn't cost much, and they were never allowed to see the script before they shot it. To me, the most interesting filmmakers now, if they make another film, would be the Coen brothers.
They're magnificent. No
Country for Old Men. Oh my God, the greatest villain in history.
He really is fantastic. I often, it's beautifully shot and some beautiful scenes, and Javier Bardem, one of my favorite actors, just a fantastic portrayal. I mean, there's few villains. I write a show about villains, and we will reference, you'd like him to be like that.
Oh, he outdoes Hannibal Lecter. I mean, he's just absolutely outstanding. But where do you think movies are going? I've always thought, it's always been predicted that there would be an end to movies. I never thought there would be an end to movies because people are herd animals. And there's nothing more wonderful than being in a theater, whether it's a theater piece you're watching or whether it's a movie you're watching, and sharing that experience, especially if it's excellent. I mean, I saw Hal Holbrook as Mark Twain tonight 5 times. And my God, Christopher, it is just an absolute joy. So I think movies will never die. But God, they're just comic books now.
They are comic books. I think the challenge is, particularly coming out of COVID, is that it's hard to make a movie, and it's harder to get distribution for that film. and so it is more of a challenge. You know, the experience of being in a theater. I mean, I guess the fear is that feature films will be like theater. Like we have a subscription to the Mark Taper Forum. We go to theater when we were in England and or New York or London and New York. It does seem like it's a bit privileged, where there was a time where, you know, it would be that people have that they want to go to the movies, or they want to go to theater, or they want to, and our movies going to be a little more privileged now? Does it need to be more of a, certainly from the studio's point of view, they only want these big, you know, Marvel projects. You know, I don't know. That's why I liked television, because there was a desire to, there was more, there's a little more creative freedom, and there was so many outlets for television, or for TV shows.
Do you have any desire whatsoever to make an independent film or to write a book?
I would say that I have more of a desire to make what would be, if there was something, you know, if I had more money, the question of making it more of the novel would be a TV show, in the sense that it would be a serialized drama that, you know, but you create it first, and then you find, you know, so you have the 10 or 13 episodes, and then you find, you know, you make it independently, and then you try to find a buyer for it.
What do you think was the greatest drama ever on television anywhere?
Oh, on television anywhere. Wow. That is, well, you know.
You might not have even seen it, but you know what mine is?
What is yours?
And I don't think anybody will ever come close to it. Is I, Claudius on PBS.
I was going to say I, Claudius. Honestly, that is my, I have it. I was going to pull it off the shelf back here. There, I have it.
Oh my God. Yes. Oh my God. It's just unbelievable.
That I can say, Derek Jacobi, that series. I mean, you always pointed out, which I never really noticed, but I think it was up against Mork and Mindy at one point, which I had enjoyed. But then I started watching it, and again, as a child, I didn't understand all of it, and yet it was really, really amazing, and I think still holds up today. I watched it about probably 5 years ago, but it is astonishing. I do think that. I'm a bit of an Anglophile, in that I do think that British television is the BBC produces a lot of wonderful material. They certainly cast in a more realistic way.
Well, recently, the past year, I didn't miss one episode of Victoria, and of course, Faulty Towers.
Yeah,
John, please. Anyway, yeah. Christopher. Oh my God! Thank you for doing this last show with me. I absolutely adore you. Thank you for having me on, and it is a little funny and strange to do the show, but it's been fun. Oh well, I'm glad you like it. Your mother.
I love the backdrop still.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. And I love the fact you have I, Claudius behind you.
Yeah, I was going to pull it off the rack here to prove it to you, but yeah.
Well, I hope I get down there to see you soon, or you get up here.
I'm going to try to get up there soon.
Okay, and I'll take you to Boulder Creek. You will absolutely love it. Best golf course here.
Yeah.
Oh God, I adore you. Give my love to Ann Adele.
I will.
And Adele and Tom. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. The reruns will be coming up on Saturday nights at 7 o'clock, and we'll let you know when we're coming back with new guests. Thank you again. This is John Barbour saying good luck.